You ever see someone you know so well suddenly look like a stranger? That's how it felt watching Caleb cry at midnight. It was New Year's Eve, and our friend group had rented this weird retro cabin upstate for the weekend. One of those wood-paneled places with orange shag carpet and a half-broken hot tub. The kind of place that made you feel like you were either in a teen slasher film or a really nostalgic Subaru commercial. There were 8 of us total, all 20-somethings packed into this one-level rental, dancing to throwback pop songs in the living room while cheap champagne sloshed in plastic flutes. Everyone was tipsy, maybe drunk, and yelling the countdown like it meant something. 10, 9, 8. I looked over at Caleb on 3. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't even smiling. Just standing still, eyes fixed on the floor, shoulders tense. Then I saw it. A single tear sliding down his cheek. Just one. Then another. And then, Happy New Year! I barely heard it. I was too busy watching him quickly wipe his face with his sleeve like he was just fixing his glasses. He did that thing where you blink a lot to pretend you're just tired. He caught me looking and gave this small, hollow smile that made my stomach twist. But I didn't ask. Not then. I clinked my glass against his like everyone else. Said, Happy New Year, man. He nodded. We both pretended nothing had happened. That was Caleb. Or at least, that's how I thought he was. We'd been friends for over 2 years. Met through mutuals in Brooklyn. Bonded over a shared hatred of clubbing. And a deep love for overpriced dumplings. We had our own rhythm. Weekly movies, late-night grocery runs, constant teasing about his obsession with soft cardigans, and my inability to properly cook rice. I never thought of him as someone who cried. Not like that. Not quietly in a room full of people. The party kept going. People kissed. A couple made out a little too hard against the fridge. Someone spilled beer on the Bluetooth speaker. But all I could think about was that look on Caleb's face. Like something had cracked, and no one else noticed. We didn't talk much the rest of the night. Just the occasional glance, a shared joke about how bad the dance playlist was. He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. Around 2 a.m., the cabin started clearing out. People going to bed, pairing off, stumbling down the hallway with their shoes still on. I ended up in the kitchen, rinsing out empty bottles and trying to ignore the fact that I hadn't had the nerve to ask him what was wrong. Then I heard the sliding door open. I turned and saw Caleb stepping out onto the back deck, barefoot, wrapped in one of those soft cardigans he always wore like armor. I followed without thinking. Outside, the cold hit hard. Stars above us, snow on the ground, our breath coming out in clouds. He was leaning on the railing, looking out into the woods like he was waiting for something to answer him back. I didn't say anything at first. Just stood beside him, close enough that our arms barely brushed. He broke the silence. You ever feel like everyone else is moving on without you? His voice was quiet, raw in a way I hadn't heard before. Yeah, I said, not lying. All the time. He nodded, but didn't look at me. Tonight just hit different, I guess. I waited, not pushing, letting him decide how much to say. He let out a shaky breath. I found out this morning my dad got engaged to a woman he's been dating for, like 6 months. I glanced over. Damn. Yeah. I didn't even know he was serious about anyone. And now I'm getting texts from family about how excited they are and how it's time I follow his lead, whatever that means. He paused. I don't think they know I'm even dating someone. Or that I could. I blinked. Wait, are you? He gave a weak laugh. No, that's the thing. I'm not. Haven't in a while. And even if I was, it's not like I can bring home a guy and have it go over well. I looked at him, really looked. His eyes were still glassy, but he wasn't crying anymore. You're out to your family, he shrugged. Technically. But it's more like they just stopped asking questions. We don't talk about it. And I guess I don't push it. I nodded, the pieces clicking together. The sadness. The quiet. The tears at midnight. It wasn't just about his dad. It was about everything he wasn't saying. I get it, I said. He turned to me, brows raised slightly. I mean, not all of it. But I know what it's like to feel left behind. I continued. To wonder if you're ever going to get to have what everyone else seems to find so easily. Caleb looked down, his voice barely audible. It's dumb. I shouldn't care this much. It's not dumb. He finally met my eyes, and I don't know what it was. Maybe the cold, maybe the silence, maybe the fact that it was just us. But something shifted in that moment. A weight lifting between us. An understanding. I reached out and touched his arm, just briefly. He didn't pull away. We didn't speak for a while after that. Just stood there side by side on the freezing deck, breathing mist into the air, our fingers occasionally brushing when the wind shifted. I wanted to say something, anything that would make it feel less heavy. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable. Not exactly. It felt like standing in the middle of something delicate, something still forming. And if I spoke too soon, I'd scare it off. He finally broke it. Thanks for coming out here, he said, his voice steadier now. Yeah, I said. I figured you could use a buffer from the disaster happening in the kitchen. He cracked a smile. Was that Marco doing karaoke with no music? God. I hope not. I think that was supposed to be Bohemian Rhapsody, but it sounded like a dying animal. Caleb let out a short laugh, and for a second, it felt normal again. Like we were just two friends, teasing each other under the stars, the air not so cold when he looked at me like that. You know, he said after a moment, I don't usually do that. Sing Queen in public? He gave me a look, but it was soft. Cry, especially not like that. Around people. I didn't say anything. Just leaned a little closer, not enough to make it a move, but enough that he'd feel it if he wanted to. Tonight just caught me off guard, he continued. I thought I was fine, I really did, but when the countdown hit and I saw everyone kissing and hugging and making out on countertops or whatever the hell they were doing, it was like something inside me just cracked. I could hear it in his voice, the honesty he probably hadn't even told himself until now. It wasn't just about my dad, he added. It was about feeling invisible, like I'm always the one on the sidelines, watching everyone else find their person. I wanted to tell him he wasn't invisible, that I saw him, really saw him. Every dumb joke, every little habit, every time he got quiet in a crowd and pretended he wasn't. But I didn't say that yet. Instead, I said, I used to feel like that every year, like I was the only one not getting picked. He looked over. Used to? I shrugged. I guess I stopped expecting it. Stopped letting the countdown be the thing that decided how I felt about my life. He was quiet and then asked, So what changed? I didn't answer right away, because the real answer was him. Spending time with Caleb had changed something in me over the last year. I hadn't said it out loud, hadn't even admitted it to myself fully. But there was something about the way he showed up, the way he listened, the way he somehow made me feel like I wasn't on the outside of things anymore. I don't know, I said finally. Maybe I just stopped thinking the best part of the year had to happen at midnight. He looked at me for a long second, not smiling, not crying, just looking. The wind kicked up and he pulled his cardigan tighter. It's freezing out here, he muttered. Yeah, I said. We should go back in. But neither of us moved. I don't want to, he added. That caught me off guard. I glanced at him. Why not? He hesitated, then said, Because it feels different out here, like I can breathe. That made something twist in my chest. Because I felt it too. The stillness, the clarity, the way it felt safer with just us and the woods, and the sound of snow melting off the roof. He leaned forward slightly, his arms resting on the railing, eyes scanning the trees. I used to think by 27 I'd have it all figured out, he said. Career, love, a guy who'd make me feel like I wasn't too much or too quiet or too whatever I am. You're not too anything, I said without thinking. He looked over, startled. Then his eyes softened, and he let out a slow breath like he'd been waiting for someone to say that for years. You don't know how good it feels to hear that, he said. I wanted to reach out, touch his hand maybe, or say something that would tell him everything I was thinking, everything I'd kept behind jokes and silence for months. But instead, I said, Come on, let's get you inside, at least before your toes fall off. He didn't argue, but as we turned to head in, his hand brushed against mine again. This time, he didn't pull away. And neither did I. Back inside, most of the cabin had settled into some chaotic version of bedtime. People passed out on beanbags, someone trying to microwave pizza rolls while giggling uncontrollably, a couple loudly arguing in whispers about where they left the phone charger. We stepped over a couple bodies and grabbed our toothbrushes from the kitchen counter where someone had kindly shoved all the toiletries into a pile. Then we made our way down the hallway to the room we were sharing. Caleb and I had gotten stuck with the twin beds, opposite sides of a room that smelled faintly like mildew and old pine cleaner. There were glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to the ceiling, probably from a kid's bedroom years ago. I flopped onto mine with a groan, shoes still on. Caleb sat on the edge of his, staring at the floor like he wasn't ready to lay down yet. "Hey," I said, "you okay?" He nodded, then looked at me. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." He hesitated then. "Did you ever wonder what would happen if you just told someone how you felt?" I blinked. "You mean like in general?" He shrugged. "Yeah. Or maybe not. Maybe someone specific." My throat went dry. "I guess it depends on the person." His eyes didn't leave mine. "What if it was someone you saw all the time? Someone who felt safe, but also like, maybe you were afraid of messing it up?" My heart was racing. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I'd probably tell them anyway," I said, "because wondering is worse." A beat passed, then another. And then he said, "I think I've had feelings for you for a while. I didn't want to ruin anything, but when you followed me outside earlier and didn't say anything, just stood with me, I felt like maybe I wasn't crazy." It hit me so fast, I didn't know how to respond. He sat there, still, vulnerable, waiting for the hammer to fall. So I sat up and said the only thing I really meant. "You're not crazy." He didn't say anything at first, just sat there staring at me like he wasn't sure he'd heard me right. Then, "I'm not?" "No," I said, softer this time. "You're not crazy." Caleb looked down at his hands, fingers twisted together in his lap. His shoulders were tense like he was still bracing for something. I stood up from my bed and crossed the small space between us, sinking down onto the floor in front of him. "Hey," I said, "look at me." He did, slowly, cautiously. His eyes were glassy again, but not from tears this time. Just the weight of being seen. "I don't know when it happened," I admitted, "but at some point, you stopped being just my friend. And I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't want to mess it up either." Caleb exhaled, his whole body seeming to deflate, like he'd been holding his breath for months. "That night you brought me soup when I was sick," I went on. "You stayed and watched that dumb movie with me, even though you had plans. You remember that?" He nodded slowly. "I remember thinking, this guy, he's not just nice. He's not just showing up because he's a good friend. It felt like more. And I wanted it to be." Caleb's mouth curved into the softest, most cautious smile I'd ever seen on him. "It was more," he said. "I wanted to stay. I didn't care about the plans. I just wanted to be near you." That did something to me, hearing it out loud. All the little moments we'd shared over the past year suddenly sharpened, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The way he always lingered when we hugged goodbye, the way his texts got longer at night, how he knew how I liked my coffee even though I never told him. I reached up and took one of his hands. He didn't flinch. He just let me hold it. "It doesn't have to change everything right away," I said. "But I don't want to pretend anymore. Not after tonight." He squeezed my fingers gently. "Me either." We stayed like that for a while. Me on the floor between his knees, him sitting on that creaky twin bed in a too-thin cardigan. No grand gestures, no fireworks. Just a quiet, shared certainty that we didn't have to keep dancing around it. Eventually he tugged on my hand. Silent question. I stood up. There wasn't room on his bed for both of us, not really. But we figured it out. I lay on my side, and he curled in behind me, his arm looping around my waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You know," he said, his voice a warm hum near my ear, "I always thought New Year's was about starting over. But I think this time it's more about finally being honest." I nodded against the pillow. Feels like the right time? We didn't kiss. Not that night. It wasn't about that yet. It was about him finally letting someone hold the weight he'd been carrying alone, and me finally letting him in. At some point, he fell asleep. I could tell by the change in his breathing, slow and even against my back. I stayed awake a little longer, listening to the distant sounds of someone snoring down the hall, and the occasional pop of a half-dead firecracker someone had saved for the after-party. I thought about all the New Year's Eves before this one. Every awkward party, every lonely midnight, every forced smile, and how I never once imagined one would end like this. Not with Caleb. Not with him quietly wrapped around me in the dark, his breath warming the back of my neck, his hand resting lightly on my stomach like he'd always belonged there. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something. It was already here. The next morning, I woke up before he did. It was still early. Too early, judging by the pale blue light barely creeping through the window. The room was quiet, filled with the soft sounds of Caleb breathing behind me, his body still warm and pressed close. At some point in the night, he'd pulled the blanket over both of us. I was still half in yesterday's clothes, my arm tingling slightly from being pinned under his. I didn't move. Not yet. Instead, I lay there listening to the silence of the house. It was rare, that kind of stillness. No one stumbling around for Advil yet. No banging kitchen cabinets. Just a low hum of distant wind and the occasional groan of old pipes expanding with the morning chill. It felt like the world was giving us a moment to ourselves. I looked down at his hand resting on my chest. His thumb had found its way into the collar of my shirt at some point, just resting there, barely noticeable. That tiny, unconscious contact made my heart squeeze in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't the thrill of something new. It wasn't lust or adrenaline or even excitement. It was comfort, familiarity, intimacy without effort. Caleb stirred a few minutes later, shifting against me. I felt him wake up slowly, his breath changing, his grip loosening slightly, then tightening again like he realized he was still holding on. "Morning," he mumbled, voice rough with sleep. "Hey," I whispered back. We stayed quiet for a bit longer, both of us still half asleep, our legs tangled under the thin blanket. Then he pulled back slightly, just enough to look at me. His hair was sticking up on one side, and his eyes were still puffy, but there was something different in his expression. Softer, maybe, less guarded. "You good?" he asked, brushing his knuckles against my chest. "Yeah," I said. "You?" He nodded. "I think so." There was a pause. Then he added, "I meant what I said last night." I knew what he meant, but I still asked, "Which part?" "That I've had feelings for you. That I didn't want to ruin what we have." I turned to face him fully, our knees bumping under the blanket. "You didn't ruin anything." He looked at me like he was still waiting for the catch, for the regret to show up in my eyes. But it wasn't there. "I've thought about it too," I admitted. I just kept telling myself it was easier to keep things how they were. Safer. Caleb smiled a little, that nervous kind of smile people get when they're standing on a ledge, and just took their first step off. "Do you regret it? Telling me? Do you?" He shook his head immediately. "No. Not for a second?" "Then I don't either." We lay there a little longer, facing each other now, still close but not touching. There was something nice about the space between us, just enough to see each other clearly. "So," he said after a moment, "what happens now?" I laughed, because it was the kind of question that sounded simple but wasn't. "You mean like, in general? I mean, are we a thing? Are we trying this?" I looked at him, really looked, and realized I'd already made up my mind last night. "I want to," I said, "but only if you do." He looked relieved, but still a little cautious. "I do. I'm scared I'll screw it up." "You won't," I said. "And if you do, I'll call you out. We're still us." It seemed to settle something in him. He leaned in and rested his forehead against mine for a second, this quiet, grounding gesture that felt more intimate than a kiss. "I'm glad it was you," he said quietly. "Out there on the deck. I don't know what I would have done if it had been anyone else." I closed my eyes and let that sink in, let myself believe it. We got up eventually, reluctantly, knowing the rest of the house would be waking soon. I gave him space to change, turned around while he pulled on fresh clothes. But when I looked back, he was watching me the same way I'd caught him doing before, quietly, like he didn't think I'd notice. This time I looked back and smiled. We walked into the kitchen together, and the moment we stepped into the chaos of the day after, a half-empty cereal box on the table, someone playing lo-fi beats through a busted speaker, Marco snoring face down on the couch. Caleb pulled away slightly, not in a dramatic way, just a little shift of his body, a returned mask of casual friendliness. I got it. It wasn't time yet. No one knew, and we hadn't figured out how to share this version of us with the world. But just before he sat down on the opposite end of the table, he reached for my coffee mug and handed it to me without a word, like a tiny signal that he was still right there. I caught the flicker of a smile behind his eyes, just for me, and that was enough. The rest of the weekend passed in this quiet, low-key tension. Not bad tension, not really. Just that sort of emotional hangover you get when something important happens and you're still figuring out how to hold it. Caleb and I didn't talk much about what had shifted between us, but it was there, always humming beneath the surface. Like the way he sat next to me on the couch instead of across the room. Or how he handed me my hoodie without being asked when we all stepped outside to watch the snow fall late Saturday night. Or how we kept catching each other's eyes in the mirror while brushing our teeth, both of us biting back these tiny smiles we didn't know what to do with. No one else seemed to notice. And part of me was grateful. The other part was surprised by how much I kind of wanted them to. By Sunday afternoon, people were packing up. There was a rushed energy in the air. Boot stomping, bag zipping, someone yelling for their left glove like it had been stolen by the ghost of New Year's past. Caleb and I rode back together in his car. Just us. The drive down from the mountains was quiet, both of us half exhausted, half floating. Snow covered everything in that soft, unbothered way it always does when you're not ready to return to real life yet. Caleb had one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely in his lap, fingers twitching every now and then like they wanted to reach for mine but weren't sure how to ask. "Want to stop for coffee?" he asked, somewhere around exit 18. "Always," I said, grateful for the excuse to pause. We found a roadside diner, the kind with red vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like nostalgia. It was nearly empty, except for an older couple sipping quietly in the corner. The waitress looked like she'd worked there since 1972, and had seen every kind of hungover 20-something crawl through. After a long weekend. She didn't ask questions. We sat in a booth by the window, Caleb's leg pressed lightly against mine under the table, and neither of us moved to change that. I kept catching him looking at me while pretending to study the menu. "You're doing it again," I said. "Doing what?" "Looking at me like you're trying to figure something out." He smirked, took a sip of his coffee, and said, "Maybe I am." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" "I'm still working on it." We grinned at each other in that dumb, quiet way people do when they know exactly what they're doing but pretend it's still a mystery. After we ate, just pancakes and eggs, nothing fancy, we lingered. Neither of us said it, but I think we both felt the clock ticking louder now. The weekend was over. We'd have to go back to our regular lives, to Brooklyn, to jobs and roommates and social circles that hadn't seen what happened between us. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, then rested his elbow on the table, chin in his palm. "So what do we do now?" he asked. I looked out the window for a second, then back at him. "What do you want to do?" He hesitated. Not in a hesitant kind of way, more like he was weighing how honest to be. "I want to try," he said. "You and me. For real." I swallowed, heart thudding a little harder. "I want that too." He smiled, small but certain. "But I'm nervous. That makes two of us." "I'm not great at relationship stuff," he admitted. "I've always found reasons not to start anything serious. I get weird when I feel like people are depending on me. You've never let me down." He looked at me for a long second. "You always say the right thing. Only when I mean it." The check came. Caleb reached for it, and I didn't argue. He left a decent tip, even though the coffee was mostly water and the eggs were somehow both dry and undercooked. Then we headed back to the car. On the road again, the sky was starting to fade into late afternoon, that sleepy winter gray, where the sun's just a suggestion behind the clouds. "Should we tell people?" he asked, eyes on the road. "Eventually," I said. "We don't have to rush." "Yeah." I just don't want to hide it. You don't have to. He smiled, and this time he did reach for my hand. Rested it on the gear shift between us, his fingers curling around mine. It stayed there the whole drive. Coming back to the city was like being dropped into a cold shower. The contrast was immediate. The silence of the mountains replaced with honking horns, crowded sidewalks, and the unmistakable smell of exhaust and sidewalk pretzels. It didn't help that we both had to go straight into our respective lives. Caleb had a client pitch Monday morning, and I had a deadline for an architectural mock-up due by noon. We didn't make any dramatic declarations when we got back. No, see you tonight, or what are we now? We just hugged a little tighter than usual outside his building and promised a text. That first week was weird. Not bad. We texted like normal, still shared dumb memes and updates about coworkers being disasters. But there was a new layer under everything. Like we were both trying to figure out how to be us without overthinking what us was now. The night that shifted everything again came the following Friday. It was cold as hell, wind snapping through the city like it was personally offended by anyone trying to enjoy themselves. I'd just finished a brutal week, and Caleb sent a text around 6:30. You hungry? I made chili, the good kind. I didn't need more convincing than that. When I got to his place, the apartment smelled like cumin, garlic, and something deeply comforting. Caleb was barefoot in sweatpants, stirring a pot with the kind of focus that made me smile from the doorway. He turned, eyes lighting up. Perfect timing. Do I ever show up late when food is involved? He handed me a bowl, still hot, and we sat on the couch, legs tucked under us, both of us facing each other. There was something easy about it, something settled, like all the awkward, what do we call this, tension had melted somewhere between the mountains and this bowl of chili. After we ate, we ended up watching this stupid rom-com on Netflix. Neither of us were really paying attention. At one point, our hands found each other again, and this time, we didn't pretend it was just casual. Can I ask you something kind of dumb? He said halfway through the movie. Always. He paused, eyes flicking toward the screen and back. Are we dating? I smiled, heart tugging at how earnestly he asked it. I think so, I said. Unless we're both just holding hands recreationally now. He rolled his eyes, but there was no hiding the smile spreading across his face. You're annoying. And you're blushing. Shut up, he said, but he was laughing now. Then, after a beat, okay, good. I just didn't want to assume. That night, I stayed over for the first time. Not because we planned it or because anything happened. We just fell asleep on the couch, tangled up in each other. And when we woke up around 2 a.m. to a paused credits screen, he mumbled, Stay, and I did. He had a toothbrush for me the next morning, still in the package, still with the CVS sticker on it. You bought this? I asked, holding it up. He shrugged. Just in case. I kissed him for the first time after that. It was gentle, quiet. Not some fireworks and falling over furniture kind of kiss. Just me, standing in his small bathroom doorway, and him smiling nervously with toothpaste on the edge of his lip. I leaned in. He leaned too, and everything went still for a second. It was the kind of kiss that didn't need to prove anything. After that, things moved fast in that slow kind of way. We didn't post about it. We didn't announce anything to our friends, but we started showing up together more often, sitting closer, leaving at the same time. We weren't hiding, we just weren't rushing. One night, a few weeks later, after dinner at our usual dumpling spot, we were walking back to his place when he said, I told my sister. Told her what? That we're dating. I stopped. You did? He nodded, hands stuffed into his coat pockets. She was cool about it. Asked if it was the guy the first was always texting. I laughed. You were always texting me? Okay, not always, but... Yeah, a lot. I reached for his hand. I'm glad you told her. Me too. It felt good. There was a pause. Then he said, I want to tell more people. I'm tired of keeping things quiet. And just like that, something inside me eased. Because it was real now. Not just in private. Not just between us. But something we were stepping into together, out loud. We came out slowly, not in some sweeping Instagram post or dramatic dinner party announcement. Just little moments like letting Caleb rest his head on my shoulder at our friend Mika's place during movie night, or casually saying "we" when someone asked what we did last weekend. The first real test came one evening when we showed up to a group hang together, one of those loosely planned nights where a bunch of friends meet up at a noisy bar, everyone yelling over each other to order tacos and overpriced cocktails. Caleb had texted me earlier, "Let's not overthink tonight. Just be you, I'll be me, we're good," and we were. At least until someone noticed the way we shared a plate of nachos and kept brushing each other's hands without moving away. It was our friend Sam who said something first. "Okay, what is happening here?" I looked at Caleb. He looked at me. Then, without missing a beat, Caleb just said, "We're dating." Sam blinked. "Wait, seriously?" "Yeah," I said, trying not to sound nervous. Sam stared for a beat, then raised his beer and said, "Took you long enough." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. From there, it just unfolded. Our friends were supportive. Surprised, maybe. But not in a weird way. If anything, most of them were more curious about the timing than the fact that it was us. "You mean all those late-night grocery runs weren't just platonic zucchini emergencies?" Mika teased. "No," Caleb said dryly. "Some of them were also carrot-related." That night was the first time we kissed in public. Nothing wild. Just a quick peck outside the bar when we were saying goodbye to everyone. It wasn't even a big deal. No one made a scene. But afterward, walking back to his place, Caleb kept touching his lips and grinning like he couldn't believe we'd actually done it. "I thought I'd freak out," he admitted as we reached his door. "I didn't." "Good," I said, leaning in close, "because I was going to do it again." "You're ridiculous." "Come here." And I kissed him again. We fell into a rhythm after that. I started keeping a toothbrush at his place. He'd leave extra socks in my drawer. I learned which side of the bed he hated. Left, something about the angle of the AC vent. And he learned that I can't fall asleep unless I have one foot sticking out from under the blanket. We didn't have the dramatic "I love you" moment either. It came naturally, one random Wednesday after I had a crap day at work and showed up to his place to find he'd ordered my favorite takeout and queued up my favorite show. I was halfway through eating when I said it, just blurted it out like it was a regular sentence. "I love you." I hadn't even realized it was the first time until Caleb froze, chopsticks midair. Then he smiled, slow and real, and said, "Yeah?" I nodded. "Yeah." He set down his food, leaned across the table, and kissed me. "I love you too." And that was it. No fireworks, no dramatic music cue. "Just the simple truth," finally said. It's been nearly a year since that night in the mountains. We still talk about it sometimes. The countdown. The tears. That frozen moment on the deck when neither of us knew what would come next. "It's weird," Caleb said once while we were lying in bed, legs tangled under the covers, "how 1 second changed everything." "Yeah," I replied, "but it wasn't just 1 second. He looked over. "No? It was every second after that, every time we chose not to run." He smiled, reached for my hand under the blanket and said, "Still choosing you, you know." "Me too." We made a tradition of it, New Year's in the mountains. It started with just the two of us that first year after everything changed. Then the second year, we invited a few close friends. Not the full chaotic crew, just a handful of people who knew and loved us as we were, no questions asked. Now, 3 years in, we keep it simple. Same crooked cabin, same bad hot tub, same paper decorations from the dollar store we keep reusing, because Caleb thinks it's charming. And honestly, it kind of is. On the night of the countdown, just before midnight, we stepped out onto the same deck where he cried the first time. This year, there was no sadness in his eyes, just the reflection of string lights and snow, and the glow of everyone counting down behind us. 5, 4. Caleb turned to me, cheeks pink from the cold. 3, 2. He didn't look away. 1. Happy New Year! The sound exploded behind us, cheering, glasses clinking, someone yelling that the champagne tasted like actual regret. But we didn't move. Didn't look back. He reached up, cupped the back of my neck and pulled me in for a kiss. Not rushed, not nervous, just full of warmth and knowing. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "Still choosing you," he whispered. I smiled. Always. Inside, someone put on music. Someone else was already asking where the chips went. People were laughing, clinking glasses, slipping into another night of memories and photos that would be blurry in the best way. But we stayed outside a little longer. No rush, no hiding, no more waiting for someone else to choose us or for the right moment to finally begin. We were already in it. Together.